Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we are playing with some Zygopetalum orchids. Veronica said that she found some Zygopetalums in one of her flower shops or stores and asked me if I'm interested. And of course, I'm like, oh yes, I have been looking for these types of Zygopetalums for years at this point. And recently, as you may or may not know, I have been known to do pretty okay with Zygopetalums. And I remember that there are some varieties that smell absolutely exquisite. The varieties that I have are not so fragrant. And I'm really excited to grow more actually. So what we're gonna do today is repot them and talk about Zygopetalum related stuff as we do so. Alrighty, let's start with this one. I do see something on the new growth, sadly, here. Do you see this blackened part? It really doesn't look good and it continues on the leaf. So, to be fully honest, we might actually lose the new growth on this one, but it's okay because pseudobulbs can actually create another new growth. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. So we'll see what happens to this new growth. If we're gonna lose it, it's okay. The pseudobulbs look good and they do have the capability of producing other pseudobulbs. So let's see what we have here. Well, I do believe that all of these Zygopetalums are in the coconut fiber plus bark mixture. I do see it is a pretty typical medium for them. Look how good the roots look like. They're not dead. They're actually pretty stiff and I do have growing tips. So even if we're gonna... Oh yeah, look at this. We are most likely losing this new growth. I'm considering even removing it right now because look at it. I think the base of it is soft. But we'll see. First, let's just remove all of this medium from the root system as gently as possible. Zygopetalums don't have super flexible roots, but they're not incredibly brittle either. I think that's about enough. The next thing that I will do is go to the sink and just rinse the roots very well under the jet of water. I will clean out my tray and come back when I'm done. Alrighty, this is interesting. So as I was rinsing the roots, the new growth just snapped. You saw how wobbly it was. My initial thought was that the base was mushy, but upon further inspection, I'm not entirely sure anymore. So let me give you a close-up to see what I mean. So yes, we do have some issues here towards the base, but I'm not entirely sure if they're active or not because this is not super mushy. It doesn't look super healthy, but it's not very bad either. What broke, do you see this? Is the rhizome because it's very thin here. But look at this, the new growth has just the tiniest bit of rhizome with a root. Now that can make the difference between a new growth which can survive on its own and one that cannot. Typically with sympodial orchids, we cannot just remove new growths that are not even mature yet, pot them separately and expect a new orchid to grow. However though, there are some special instances in which if we remove a new growth, even if not mature, but we manage to save a little bit of a rhizome and at least one root or a couple of roots, then that orchid has a chance. The new growth has a chance. We did this with the cattleyas that we saved last year. Check the video down below. It's a very interesting instance and it's a very subtle difference between new growths which I'm sure cannot be saved and new growths like this. Now the problem remains this blackened thing. I don't want to start removing leaves because sometimes orchids can manage their issues on their own. I will take some precaution steps as well. Of course, I will spray hydrogen peroxide and I will pot this orchid together with the mother plant. And you know what? If we are lucky, then this plant will make it. Simply because it has a little bit of a rhizome and a root here. This makes the difference. Very interesting case. I'm happy I started with this one. The mother plant will be absolutely fine. Yes, it lost the new growth, but it can sprout new growth from this bulb or from this bulb. And we have quite a lot of roots at our disposal, so it has a lot of chances. So I'm done with cleaning up the roots. What I noticed is that many of the roots are absolutely fine, but many just had sections that were not fine anymore. So what I did was cut the sections which were not good anymore and I left the entirety of the root system alone. Now I will be spraying very liberally hydrogen peroxide 3% on the root system. If you want to use this product, you can use it straight from the bottle. If it's more than 3% concentration, you need to dilute it with water to obtain a 3% concentration. you will see on the label what concentration the product has. Some people use 6%. I am a little wary to use that on the root system. 3% has never caused issues for my orchids, for the main part anyway, so I'm using the product straight from the bottle. If you're newer to my channel and you don't know why I use hydrogen peroxide on the roots of new orchids, well, I'm trying to eliminate snails and their eggs. This product has been keeping me safe for 6 years or so. I did not see one single snail on my orchids ever since I started to do this with new orchids. Alrighty, let's talk about the medium. My medium of choice is a combination between sphagnum moss and bark. Nothing else added. I don't need fillers, I don't need to aerate the medium, particularly for this orchid that is semi-terrestrial or terrestrial depending on the hybrid, and really does not enjoy excessive air anyway. So I'm not gonna try to aerate my medium. This will be enough aeration to maintain the orchids oxygenated so that they can pick up water and nutrients, but stuff like perlite and leca, they're not needed. And let me just show you one of the zygos that I already have in my collection. There we have him. This is the strange hybrid that I got from Klassen. At the time when I repotted it, I made a mixture with bark, moss, and all sorts of perlite and leca. I think I put in some calcinated rocks as well. But anyway, this extra aeration did not help me one bit during summertime because I always had to keep my eye on this orchid not to let it be very bone dry. It really dislikes that. So this aeration didn't work out for me that well. The orchid is doing okay, the roots are absolutely fine, but this is only because I was on top of watering. It was stressful, so I can obtain the same result simply by removing those fillers, the leca and perlite and all of those things. And that's just something that I choose to do for my environment. The fillers or the aeration materials are not bad, and for some environments they can be very useful, but my environment is simply not that type. So I'll go ahead and repot the orchid. I'm gonna speed up the process so I don't bore you too much. Now, because my orchid has a lot of roots, it will actually trap some very big air pockets, which will not be okay for this orchid. So what I will do is use the trick that I did show you in a previous video with a bamboo skewer, directing the medium and filling up the air pockets. All I do is insert the skewer on the side where I can see if I'm gonna damage roots or not, and just push the medium inside, making sure that I have some bark at the top. I will add more and making it fall right here on the sides. And by this movement, I will make the medium fall in between the roots as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and come back when I'm done. So at this point, I will also add this new growth right next to the mother plant. I will stabilize it initially with a bamboo skewer. I just wanted to lean a little bit on it while I keep adding medium. The medium will stabilize it to some extent, but being that we don't have roots, I will need the bamboo skewer for a while. And then of course the top layer will be bark. And after this step, we are done. And voila, we are done. Now you can see that the mother plant I did attach to the stake just to make it a little bit more secure until the roots really grab a hold of the medium, but the new growth I did not attach. And this is because hopefully it will continue to grow, expand, and putting a tie on it will constrict it. What I wanted to do is just sit. So the stake doesn't necessarily need to be tied to the orchid to do its job. If you can place it in such a manner as to maintain the orchid in place, then that's perfect. There are instances in which tying the stake to the orchid is just not possible. There are instances in which leaning the orchid on the stake is not possible either. You can see that I'm helping the new growth with the mother plant. What you can do is put a stake in the back and a stake in the front, just like this. I'm actually gonna opt for this option right here. And this will maintain the orchid in place. Pretty stable even, as you can see, until new roots grab a hold. So here's a little tip for those orchids which really cannot be tied, but they need some support. All right, so this one is done. I'm gonna water it really well, and I suppose the other ones will go quicker, but I really wanted to start with this one because I had a feeling it would be an interesting case, and it was. All right, so this one looks a little bit different. It has much more fragile roots, much snappier, hence you can see I left quite a little bit of the old medium. It's okay, I'm gonna spray it with hydrogen peroxide And it's not a whole lot, but if I were to remove all of these little pieces, the roots would be completely damaged. The previous one had a little bit more flexible roots, but they're not all the same, as the flowers are not all the same. So I definitely know that that one is not the same variety. But what I wanted to show you with this one is that we have here a new growth with a new growth, and in the back here another new growth. So that's why I'm saying that with the previous one I'm not very worried about the mother plant, because it can put on a new growth, but I would love it if the new growth which we separated managed to survive as well. How many times did I say new growth? So with this one, the roots were impeccable. There aren't a lot of roots, it wasn't pot bound, so it was easy to remove the medium, and also I did not find one single dead root. So this one is in great shape. I will spray it with hydrogen peroxide and repot it. P.S. After hydrogen peroxide 3%, you don't need to rinse, because after the fizzing reaction happens, oxygen is liberated and all you will have on the roots is water. And there we have it, my orchid is repotted. With this one, I didn't need a stake. It is pretty stable. I'm not gonna move around these orchids almost at all. So again, I used the same type of medium, and I made sure that I don't have very big air pockets. I will also cut the flower spike on this one because the flowers are spent, and I will put a label which says looks like Makai. That's a species, but it kind of looks like it. If you research it, you're gonna see what I mean. And this is actually the Zygo that I was hoping to find one day. I think this is the most perfumed one. Maybe I'm wrong. And until I figure out a proper ID for it, I'm just gonna name it Looks Like Makai, because I know which one it is. And here's another interesting one. So as I was unpotting it, a section of it fell off. It's a tiny back bulb. It had a leaf, but it was already broken, so it fell off as well. But look at this. This tiny bulb here, which, let's try to focus, it's a back bulb, has such a good root system and also a new growth. Now this little guy will take a bit to mature and to bloom, but you know what? I'm gonna pot this guy separately. I'm gonna give it away. He deserves a chance. I have quite an impressive mother plant, which I am sure will do okay, but look at this. So this new growth, which was in bloom, I didn't get to see the blooms sadly. I don't know what variety it is, but it produced not one, not two, but 3 flower spikes. I did not know Zygopetalums could do that. And these 2 flower spikes didn't bloom just yet. They have buds, but the buds are kind of pinkish and a little bit wilted. I'm gonna leave them be. Maybe, fingers crossed, maybe one bud will be okay. But on transport, I don't think the bud survived. I'm hoping that this flower spike could still bloom. So I will remove this one, which is spent, leave these 2, and if it blooms, I will definitely let you know. And here they both are repotted. I only have one more to go and we can wrap this up. And here's the last one. It looks pretty good and the root system is great, but we have the same issue as with, I think, the first one. The stem is so incredibly thin that it just breaks. I'll show you where this one broke, just so you see how thin it is. Look, this is where it broke. And also, the new growth is connected by a super thin rhizome as well. Did I say stem? I meant rhizome. So the rhizome is very thin on this orchid. So when handling it, do make sure that you don't just pick up one of the bulbs, because another bulb, and especially new growths with flowers, will just fall over and break. Rhizome is incredibly thin. So I have 2 divisions. Actually, I didn't mean to divide this orchid, but it happened. I will pot it together and everything should be fine because we have good roots on both of these divisions, but there we have it. So for this one, I'm actually gonna switch the pot size to 15 from 13 centimeters because it just fits it better. Look at that. No matter how much I tried to fit it in a standard pot, it was just not enough. The roots were too exposed, too cramped, so I think this will be better. And here they are all repotted. This one looks a little bit like the bluebirds. I'm not sure if it is. That one doesn't have spots as far as I remember, but I put a tag saying that it looks like bluebirds just to know which one it is. So very interesting repotting session today, don't you say? Let's focus a little bit more on this one though. Or better said, to focus on the subject. I do get from time to time comments asking me if a new growth has been broken or has been separated, can it still survive? Most of the times, no, Sally. If you break your new growth when it's like this and there are no roots and you cannot actually save any bit of the rhizome and the growth is very, very fresh, very young, chances are it will not survive. I'm not saying it's not worth trying. Obviously, as long as it's green, it's worth trying to save, but I also don't want to lie to you guys. However, if the new growth has some rhizome attached to it or has roots, then there are chances for it to survive. Especially dendrobiums are very, very savable. If the new cane detaches itself, but it has a root or two, it can survive. It will be very, very set back, but it can. Cattleyas, not so much. It really depends on the orchid. But even with Cattleyas, I managed to save one. Do check the description for that video. It was very interesting. So if you ever break off a new growth which is not mature but it has at least one root, definitely try to save it. It might actually survive. Alrighty then, thank you so much Veronica for sending me the zygos. I have been waiting for some Zygopetalums in my life for quite a while now, and I'm even more happy that we found some very interesting cases, which hopefully will be useful for you guys in the future. I'll keep you up to date. And with that said, you know the drill, like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular videos, orchid tutorials, repottings, all sorts of fun subjects, and also some African violets from time to time. And if you wish to support the channel, do consider visiting the merch store down below. So in conclusion, have a great weekend. I'll see you next time. Bye!